Hi, I'm Dr. Mike Totola, and I'd like to welcome you to this episode of Inside Dentistry's Product Talk. We are virtually on location in Jupiter, Florida, with Dr. Rob Ritter. Rob is both a board member and the past president of the Florida Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry. He is a Coy Center graduate and has lectured nationally and internationally on too many occasions to count, and we're here today to talk with him about GC America's Fujisem Evolve resin-modified glass ionomer cement. Rob, thanks so much for taking some time to speak with us today.
Oh, great to be with you as always, Mike. Hope you're doing well during these very different times.
Yeah, I wish I could be out there with you again in person in your gorgeous office in the nice Florida weather. Well, Rob, there are a few product categories. There are a few that have been more steady than resin-modified glass ionomer cements. GC introduced Fujisem in 2001. And it became many dentists' workhorse, crown and bridge cement. In 2007, they came out with the Fujisem Auto Mix, and in 2012, Fujisem 2, which saw a doubling of its bond strength to enamel and dentin. And then they added the slide and lock tip in 2015, and then in 2019, the big step forward to the product we're discussing today, Fujisem Evolve, and it's got some great upgrades that really bring this legacy product into the modern era. And one of the upgrades is the ability to tack cure the cement now, because they added some photo initiator to the cement. And as somebody who has spent most of their career bonding restorations into place, I'm guessing that this is one of your favorite new features.
It's a tremendous feature. Having the ability to traditionally cement my zirconia restorations, because that's the huge or overwhelming amount of restorations that I place now, without having to go through a multi-step procedure to adhesively bond them to two structure, is a huge upgrade. It's less stressful, less anxiety, very predictable, because going back even before zirconia restorations, monolithic zirconia, I was cementing all of my PFMs and my gold with resin modified glass ionomer. So we have that lineage that goes back many years.
And now with the ability to tack cure, rather than just having the patient bite down on a cotton roll and waiting and trying to keep it isolated, even though resin modified glass ionomers and Fujisem are very moisture tolerant, it's nice to be able to tack cure and start the cleanup a little bit early around the area so nothing actually accidentally gets locked into place. And GC recommends a 3-second cure time, but this is something I think you always want to test out of the mouth on a Type-It-On or on a benchtop to make sure 3 seconds is okay. You mentioned that when you go ahead and spot tack it, how long are you curing it for?
I'm going for 3 seconds, but I'm also making sure that my level on my light is at regular or lower power, because if you have it on high power or at high intense power, there's so many different settings on so many different lights right now, you could almost get this to completely set, and that would be a little bit more difficult cleanup, although RMGIs are typically pretty easy to clean up. So I would always check the intensity of your light before you start. And I think your recommendation is a very, very sound one.
Yeah, and that's a great point too about not having it on, turbo boost or boost mode when you go to cure it for that 3 seconds. But regardless, try it out of the, mouth on a Type-It-On or just on the benchtop and see how it goes. And anytime you add a new light curing material into your office to the materials you use, I think it's a great chance to break out the radiometer and test your lights and make sure you're getting 100% of the output. Are you one of the dentists who regularly likes to use a radiometer to check your curing lights and make sure they're still doing what they are supposed to be doing?
Always been using radiometers, also been using sleeves on my curing lights as well, so we don't get little goops or goobers on the end of the light, which decreases the intensity of the light, so you're not getting your full amount of power, basically energy coming through the end of that light. So that's important. And I know we're going to talk about it as well. With this system, Mike, we want to talk about that tip as well, which is really interesting.
Yeah, so the new tip is called the push and click tip. So you hold the syringe and you push the tip into place, and then you squeeze the top and bottom. And as it snaps into place, you can feel and hear the click part. In fact, you might have heard that. It's definitely an audible click.
Oh, yeah, we heard that audible click. Yeah.
And you need to hear that because obviously if you push to express the material, the tip will fall off if you don't click it into place. But the good news is you just click it back off and take it off. And the other interesting thing about this syringe, if you see those two tips, they're not right next to each other. So this allows you to actually, if you don't like the waste of cement that you see in the tip, you can express it onto a pad, or your assistant can, and actually hand mix it. So it gives you that option with this nice. Another big upgrade that they did was the Fujisem 2. If you look at the image over on the right, Rob, it was basically kind of a A3.5, kind of a darker dentin. And with the Fujisem Evolve, considering that people could use this under lithium disilicate or may use it under zirconia and have a margin that's exposed somewhere, it's much closer to an A2. Do you like this more natural shade compared to, say, the opaque white of other resin modified glass ionomers?
Absolutely. I love, natural tooth color. Number one, it'll help blend the restoration in at the margin. You won't get any potential white lines if you're super gingival. It makes it a little bit more easier to blend that transition line, which is great. Sometimes it helps to tone down the overall brightness of the restoration, which can be pretty high value these days because we're going with more high value looking ingots and pucks with zirconia and pressables. So yeah, I'm really digging the A2. It's really a great improvement for them.
Well, you were nice enough to share a case with us, so I'm going to go ahead and put that up there now and let you kind of talk us through this. This obviously isn't the before because those are really good looking crowns. Is this the try-in?
That's the try-in. I've removed the bisacryl provisionals. We try them in one at a time, then two at a time to check the contact. Of course, we take an x-ray to confirm the seat of the restorations. Make sure you go back to the mouth and make sure that there's no, space between the restoration and the margin itself. Check the contacts, check the occlusion. The great thing also about using 100% monolithic zirconia is we can adjust that polish that outside of the mouth before we go back to final cementation in the mouth.
Right. And since I think most dentists now are aware that there is a possibility of zirconia oxide becoming contaminated with saliva. I see the primer step here, but do you like to decontaminate once you've tried these crowns in the mouth before you move forward to, say, a zirconia primer?
Yeah, and let's also remember that these crowns are sent to me from my laboratory where they've used a micro etch on the inside of them to remove any sort of grinding material or glaze that was on the inside of them, so they're clean when they show up to my office. We try them in, and then the internal surface is decontaminated. And there's 3 or 4 different ways to do that in your office. Different materials, you can re-micro etch them, you can put them in an alcohol bath. I mean, there's so many ways to do that. Everybody has their own way of doing it and their own reasoning behind that, but you definitely want to clean the internal surface of those first. And then after that's dried out, then I'll go ahead and apply a zirconia primer on the inside. And again, there's quite a few companies that have those right now. You apply it for 30 seconds, you let it sit for about another 30 seconds, then you air thin it. And when you do that, you'll get this natural sort of satiny finish on the inside of the crowns, which lets you know that you can go ahead and cement those to place. Remember, you can't really adhesively bond to zirconia. So what we're really doing is trying to get a micromechanical bond to the zirconia, and just using that little extra bump of a separate primer, I feel comfortable with. I've just been doing that with all of my ceramics like we have been for 30 years, always priming the inside of our different ceramic materials.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, you never want to take what a dentist is doing and really change up their workflow, and then maybe they're not having success. So for example, GC in their testing says you definitely don't need a zirconia primer when you're using the Fujisem Evolve, but they also say if you do use a zirconia primer, it doesn't affect the bond strengths that you're going to get one way or the other. So if you've always had success using a zirconia primer, continue doing it. I like the fact that your assistants are learning one workflow every time they use, zirconia, regardless of what cement you're using. So yeah, the point is it doesn't matter whether or not you place the zirconia primer, but for somebody like yourself who's had a ton of success with it, you just feel better if you're putting it in there. So that's fine. That's
right.
There's no reason not to put it in.
And that's basically what we do, right? We have 2 workflows, one for ceramics that are etchable/bondable, and one for the ceramics that are not truly etchable, but we're still going to have some sort of primer on the inside of either one of those. Keeps it simple.
By the way, nice preps. I'm always glad when dentists are willing to show their preps to other dentists. I love how you built those up and restored them to, basically almost what it would look like if you prepped a virgin tooth. In the lab, we just see so many dentists not willing to do buildups, and you have compromised retention and things like that. Tell me about taking the temporaries off and then what you do to clean the preps up after that.
I just have to mention one thing. I learned that from my uncle Bill Strupp 26 years ago. Foundational core buildups and the 25 different reasons why you want to do that. I don't leave anybody else's older dentistry in the teeth when I prepare them. And there's a whole regimen of how we do foundational core buildups, but thank you very much for noticing that. Those are prepped equigingivally. So we remove the provisionals off that are made out of bisacryl, a lot of good ones out there. And then I'll go ahead and after, of course, we try everything in and we know everything fits, I'll go back with some sort of a micro etcher, whether it be a micro etcher from, let's say, a Danville product or a Prep Start, and we microblast the external surface of those teeth so they're absolutely clean. Then we go ahead and rinse them off and we isolate them. And then we place the cement in both crowns, push them to place, come back in, spot tack them for the 2 to 3 seconds, and then we start the cleanup. And you can see.
And it looks like, just looking at that second molar, I can see you've got that sickle scaler in there. It looks like that whole shelf of cement on the buckle's coming off in one piece. Has that kind of been your experience when you spot tack it, is that you can take it off in big chunks like that?
That's right. As a matter of fact, it normally pulls the buckle of number 19 at the same time, and I call those gull wings. You pull a gull wing off the buckle, and then you do the same on the lingual, and they come off in 2 very large pieces. Then you go circumferentially around and use the tine of the Explorer, and of course, pop your floss through.
That's a great feeling. There's nothing better than there's just some sort of feeling about getting the cement off around multiple teeth at the same time.
Cathartic, yes.
Yeah. It's cathartic, almost like those pimple popping videos that I don't like, but I mean, it's the same kind of feeling of, oh, look at all this coming off and look how good it looks. And so once that's off, you're just going, it looks like it's some of the excess interproximal that might be here.
Yes, and you just pop off the extra cement, use the sickle scaler, and then I just use the tine of the Explorer to get off of the smaller pieces.
And then floss out, like you said, on the contacts. And look at those. Those are bulletproof. Those are going to last. The only thing that might last longer would have been cast gold crowns that the patient might not have said yes to. But it's funny, Rob, I've always known you as an adhesive guy and as a cosmetic guy. So it really it shook me the first time I heard you talk about your love for resin modified glass ionomers, because it's not necessarily what you would think or what I would think that Ritter's brand was, but I think it's a great practical nod that you're giving here, that this is a way that dentists like to cement restorations, and you love it too.
I do. I still love adhesive dentistry, and I've still done a ton of it. And functional dentistry, where there's a situation like this where patient has some issues functionally and had to have both of these teeth restored, the ability to go in the posterior of the mouth and do non-adhesive dentistry and still feel really confident between the restorative material, the cement, I think you're going to be in good shape long-term for these people. And I think this is a tremendous advantage for a large portion of dentists who feel at times uncomfortable in the posterior of the mouth, getting good isolation to do adhesive dentistry. I think there's a place for resin modified glass ionomers, just like there's a place for adhesive dentistry.
Yep, and that place just continues to get bigger because of the growth of zirconia, and it's really nice to see a legacy brand now with Fujisema Ball kind of make upgrades to their cement so that it's going to play better and work better with something like zirconia. Well, Rob, thanks again for sharing a case with us. I always appreciate when dentists are willing to do that, and that will wrap it up for this episode of Product Talk. Thanks again to Dr. Ritter for spending some time with us. So on behalf of Rob, myself, and all of us here at Inside Dentistry, I want to thank you for your time and your continued commitment to quality dentistry.